Number one, make better case studies for localization in particular areas, but also for those things that we simply cannot manufacture locally, it allows us to aggregate volumes, and it will inadvertently reduce the cost of medicines on the continent.
Absolutely. We'll definitely look forward to that. Thank you very much, Mr. Zweli Bashman, MD of MSD in Sub-Saharan Africa, for taking this moment to have a conversation with me today.
Thank you very much.
And there you have it. We have more of these coming your way. Right now, we just had MD, MSD in Sub-Saharan Africa, basically just unpacking, first of all, what it is that, the kind of partnerships that MSD has gotten into, very progressive, very innovative with our country as Botswana, but as well as just really looking at, the kind of opportunities that lie within the pharmaceuticals value chain on the African continent. Coming up right on the SBS, we have even more conversations coming your way. Good morning. Good afternoon, brother. What it is that, the kind of partnerships that MSD has gotten into, very progressive, very innovative with our country as Botswana, but as well as just really looking at, the kind of opportunities that lie within the pharmaceuticals value chain on the African continent. Coming up right on the MSD in Sub-Saharan Africa. What it is that, the kind of partnerships that MSD has gotten into, very progressive, very innovative with our country as Botswana, but as well as just
Corporate Council on Africa proudly presents the 15th edition of the US-Africa Business Summit, taking place from 11th to the 14th of July. Our proud host is Botswana, one of the fastest growing economies in the world and a role model in sub-Saharan Africa.
The significance of a business forum such as the US-Africa Business Summit is to re-engage, reconnect with old companies and alliances. It's also to meet new companies and investors. It also gives us a platform to explain ourselves afresh. The US and Africa bind even closer.
Building on the positive momentum of the December US-Africa Leaders Summit and Business Forum, the summit will bring together African heads of state, US and African government officials, top CEOs, and senior business executives. The perfect opportunity to grow your network, access expert information, and close pending deals as we showcase the latest developments in infrastructure, ICT, health, energy, mining, creative industries, and agribusiness. As CCA celebrates its 30-year anniversary, this will be a momentous occasion to present Africa as a strong trade partner for US companies. Join us in Gaborone from 11 to 14 July 2023. The 2023 US-Africa Business Summit is proudly brought to you by Corporate Council on Africa, celebrating 30 years of excellence in building US-Africa business.
And we're back again, of course, broadcasting live from Royal Area at the 15th US-Africa Summit 2023. And we have yet another guest that is joining us this afternoon, yet about, to go into a very insightful conversation. I'm joined this afternoon by Ms. Joy Basu, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the Bureau of African Affairs. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. And perhaps before we even go into any further details, how are you finding Botswana so far?
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and have this conversation with you. I have found Botswana to be such a beautiful place. And this is unfortunately my first time here, but I hope it's not my last. The sunshine has been, as soon as I landed and got to walk out on that tarmac, feeling that Botswana sun on my face was really energizing. So I'm so grateful to be here. The people have been so kind, so warm, so intelligent. It just is, it's been really inspiring. And I'm grateful to the government of Botswana and the CCA for hosting this. And I want to offer my congratulations to both for what has been a really exciting summit so far, but we can dive into that. But a quick answer to your question is my time in Botswana has been wonderful and too short.
And let's go straight into the summit. How has the summit been for you? Of course, it's not over yet. We've still got one more day to go. But how has it been for you so far?
Yes, it's been really productive, and again, it's been inspiring and energizing. Whether it's our public partnership between the government of the United States and the government of Botswana, and all the private partnerships and the civil society partnerships, those are incredibly strong, and those are focused here on bringing economic opportunity to Botswana, to Sub-Saharan Africa, and to the entire continent, and that is just very energizing. And I'm so grateful for the commitment that each of the players has shown to this goal of economic development, economic growth, and economic prosperity for the people of Africa.
And speaking of economic prosperity, what would you say is the key driver of the U.S. economic growth? What can we learn from that regard?
Yes, I think, the thing I always think about America is that it's truly its people that are its talent. And America has this incredible benefit of being able to, have such incredible people from around the world come and innovate and study. And that would be my hope for Botswana and for its neighbors is the greatest resource of Africa are the African people, and how do we make sure we're investing in them, from their basic needs of food security and health security and education, but how do we invest in the people so that they can then blossom into managers and entrepreneurs and solve not only the problems, of their communities with new innovations and new ideas, but solve the problems of our world. The world needs Africans to be at their full prosperity and their full kind of utilization of all their talents if we're going to go into this next century and solve the challenges ahead together.
Now, you championed opportunities to facilitate entrepreneurship in emerging and frontier markets before. So coming out of that entrepreneurship space before government,
yes,
what would you say Botswana needs to do to grow in the entrepreneurial space?
Yes, I think there's a few things. A couple ideas that I would have, though, are continuing to invest in education. That is really a public good that the government of Botswana should continue to enforce so that people, have the skills that they need to come up with the new solutions, whether those are in clean energy or in transportation, whatever that is. I would also say one thing, coming out of California and the Silicon Valley is this acceptance of failure, right? That innovation doesn't often, happen on the first strike. We need to have a culture that makes it okay to experiment and to fail and to innovate, and to see that as success. And so it's something that I would encourage, culturally. I would also encourage, a free exchange of ideas, and that, travel, whether it's just across the border to other African countries to see the opportunities that are there, to the place coming to the United States. I know that you've done a fellowship in the United States, and it's that exchange of ideas that come from conversation that the State Department is really eager to facilitate, so that young Africans can be entrepreneurial and can see the broader world to come home and solve their challenges of their communities.
You speak of exposure as being very critical, and you keep talking about it. I'm seeing a central theme, as you say, also as a continent we need to work together. I'd like us to touch on the FCFTA, but perhaps before we get to that, what would you say are some of the greatest innovations still working within, the entrepreneurial space, within the emerging and frontier markets? What are some of the greatest innovations that you've come across? Perhaps just to sort of give us an idea of what some of those great, innovations were that we can tap into.
Yeah, well, one thing that I always find, so inspiring being on the continent are the digital innovations, right? Mm-hmm. There is such incredible talent here. And there are hubs in which those, those pools are incredibly strong, but I hope we can make that much more cross-border. And so, I think the classic example of where Africa leads when it comes to innovation and when it comes to financial technologies and the ability to kind of send money, to pay for things. There are many countries in Africa where I come and I never need cash because it is so easy to transfer money. And that is something I think that works here better, that works better in Africa than it does almost anywhere in the world. And so, I would encourage that doesn't need to be the only place. I've talked to entrepreneurs here who are using that digital ecosystem to create, new avenues for healthcare delivery. And, in some ways, we would not design the systems that we have in the US from scratch the way we have designed them. And so I'm really excited about the African entrepreneurs who are using the example and the backbone of digital infrastructure that we've seen in finance to innovate in agriculture, in healthcare, in education, to really meet the needs of the people.
Absolutely. Speaking about meeting needs, do you see the AfCFTA as a major potential contributor to growing Botswana and Africa into meeting US standards on foods and services?
Definitely. We're very supportive, optimistic about the AfCFTA, and the U.S. government has been a big supporter of the Secretariat and the work there. And I would say that, we really want to see inter-Africa trade grow for so many reasons. Primarily of those is prosperity of the people here. And that is our priority. A prosperous Africa is good for Africa and it's good for the United States. And so we are continuing to work with the Secretariat to find ways to lower those trade barriers and increase both hard and soft infrastructure. So yes, that's roads and that's railways and that's ports, but that's also soft infrastructure when it comes to, making it easier for paperwork to cross at borders, so you don't have lorries and bicycles that are backed up on these lines. When you have a growing population that is trying to meet its needs with basic foods. And to your point, yes, I do believe that we can meet the standards we need from a food security perspective and also from like a phytosanitary perspective agriculturally, not only to export across Africa, but around the world.
Absolutely. Now, as we wrap up, because we're running out of time, is there any skill development opportunity out of the U.S. to Africa going forward?
Out of the U.S. to Africa. I'm sorry, will you rephrase that question?
Is there any skills development opportunity out of the U.S. to Africa?
Yes, I think this is where I'd say I hope it goes both ways in exchanging skills.
Yeah.
And so, this is where I would say that I'd go back to the exchange of people and ideas. Whether that's coming from education or that's coming from even these cultural lenses around failure that we talked about earlier. So I hope it's not only coming from the U.S. to Africa, but back again. We have a lot to learn from each other.
Continent as well.
And I'm working forward to that partnership and that two-way trade, whether that's in ideas, in that's goods, in that's services. That partnership is what the U.S. government wants to see across Africa.
Ms. Joy Basu, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon to have this, pretty short, unfortunately due to time constraints. But thank you very much for joining me this morning to just share insight really from yourself. Coming up will be a plenary session that we'll be crossing to in just a little bit. Right on the other side of this, we'll let you know more about that. Thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah, Maureen, from a banking perspective, what can you tell us?
Thank you very much. I'm Maureen Harrington. I'm with Standard Bank Group. We're Africa's largest bank in 20 countries on the continent. But I have to say, it's always dangerous being the only representative of a bank on a panel that's focused on financing gaps. But that being said...
Or an opportunity.
Yes, an opportunity, exactly. That's the way I see it, because we have such a great story to tell at Standard Bank, and I think it's difficult to go back and think about, well, what are the reasons for the financing gap? What I like to focus on and what Standard Bank is focusing on is what can we do about it? And I think Standard Bank has a strong history of women-led businesses. Our CEO, our chairman is a woman, and she prefers to be called chairman, but so she's leading the entire group from a board perspective. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we're doing to support women entrepreneurs and also women fund managers. So for us, we think about it in 4 categories of access. And I think it all comes down to intentionality, because if you don't make an intention to change things, we'll find ourselves right where we are today, tomorrow. So we're focusing on providing education and training for our customers around STEM-related issues. We are talking about jobs and leadership opportunities. We're focused on venture capital and funding for fund managers and closing that digital gender divide. And just to give you some interesting examples, I think we do a lot of work with incubators across the continent. And I could give you 20 different examples from the 20 different markets we're in, but I think I'll focus on just a few. In Kenya, we have a program called Dada, where 52,000 women are part of this program, where we make digital training initiatives available in both mobile and computer channels, and it supports women to grow their businesses, whether it's with customized financial solutions, capacity building, scaling your business, access to capital, credit, and it's something that has become very popular in Kenya and something that we've made 20 billion shillings available for women with viable businesses across Kenya. In Uganda, we have a program called Stanbic for Her, and this is designed to help women own small enterprises with banking services, financial literacy, and training. And again, that comes through our incubator programs. In Zambia, we have a program called Anakazi Banking, which provides solutions to promote gender equality by giving women increased access to capital and training once again. In Mozambique, we've teamed up with a group called Lionesses of Africa, which I think is a great name, for women entrepreneurs. And this has supported 32,000 women through this partnership to strengthen their skills to run their business, access to capital. And then lastly, the point on Nigeria, just given some of the statistics that maybe might not be so encouraging, we have a program called the bank's Blue Blossom program, which caters to women in business with a special focus on SMEs that are at least 50% women-owned. And we have a program there called Ladies at the Table Empowerment Series, which again provides training and support and a networking environment for women who are building small businesses. I think about my own experience of the network I have through my MBA in the United States. And that's exactly the kind of networks that we're trying to build with our customers to support each other and by providing this kind of training. And the last initiative that I'll mention, so that was all focused on entrepreneurs. We also have an effort to try and promote or to lessen the gap of financing that's available for women fund managers on the continent. So here we've partnered with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and we are in the process of raising a fund to make resources available to women fund managers so that they can on-lend successfully across the continent. And in fact, we're in partnership with Visa on this program and your foundation. And we've actually made our first 3 disbursements of some grant financing in Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa for that program. So again, just to close off, I think again, it goes back to this whole idea of, as an African financial institution, how can we be intentional about solving this problem and using the resources that we have to close that gap.
Thanks, Maureen. Boy Jamelo, I'd love, I'd love to bring you in, especially considering what Maureen was saying about a lot of the progress that we are seeing. You are, you own your own business, a women-owned business on this continent in Botswana. What's been your experience? I mean, have you struggled with getting access to finance? Have you been able to, have you been approached about innovative programs to support you? I mean, talk to us a little bit about your perspective.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you very much to CCA. I greatly appreciate this opportunity. Like it has already been mentioned, my name is Tumelo Felicity Nsosa. I'm the Managing Director of Destiny Creek. We do tea packaging. We get our tea from Kenya. This journey started in 2017 through a trade mission with the BITC, the government trade agency. And I made a decision from that trip that I intend to get into that business to do tea packaging because of what was being offered, that you can get the tea from Kenya, package it in Botswana, and give it a Botswana name. So I've always wanted something of that sort. Thank you. And the other thing, I had to learn to capacitate myself because it was a new territory for me. Botswana does not have tea growing around, more especially the teas that we know, only those ones which are grow in the wild. So I had to do a lot of capacity building on myself. As much as I had a lot of fun traveling around to learn, I had to engage quite a number of those players who've already gone before me in the industry. And the creativity that came out of that. Currently, Destiny Creek, we have about 4 products, and 3 of those are herbal teas, which are our own creation. And we are looking forward to adding into the fold. Now, coming back to the issue of financing, interestingly, it seems to be a challenge to most of us women, and I had to demonstrate to the funders that I am capable of doing that. And I chose to do self-funding before I could go and approach the funders. Because even in having conversations with them, the question was, but is your project bankable? It has never been done in Botswana. So I needed not only to demonstrate to them, but also to demonstrate to myself that I'm able to do it. So I had to do a lot of bootstrapping, used the savings. At that time, I was still on active employment, and the salary, I would share it with all the expenses and make sure that the business is also covered. So the challenge of not only demonstrate when you've done something that is practical. You can't demonstrate while it's still a concept. So I know I visited local enterprise authority, LEA, and I met, I had to mention him, Repadipadi, one of the officials there. He was so excited because I brought him a box of Motswedi tea. Motswedi is the name of our tea at Destiny Creek. His excitement was that, Boitumelo, you are not only bringing me a concept, you are bringing me a complete product. And I want to see your product going beyond the borders of Botswana. So that has been the fuel in Destiny Creek for me to see Motswedi going beyond the borders. Thank you very much.
Loretta, do you want to jump in?
So I have to say I'm guilty as charged, being a former banker myself. When I was in the corporate world and I was in banking, I never really understood why SMMEs always talked about the fact that access to financing is one of their key issues. Because as bankers, we always think that, no, there's enough money in the bank to give out loans. We're actually looking for customers. We've got these wonderful products. And when I went to the other side, I realized why. We think that most women are able to just go into a bank and ask for funding. I learned in my new world, I'm a 7-year entrepreneur, I learned that it's not as easy as that. Most women entrepreneurs, especially in the micro and small business space, are not even comfortable to walk into a bank and ask for a loan. And then in the bank, we have all these processes where we say you must have this, we want to see your credit score, we want to see your credit track record, we want to see how you have been performing in your business. Guess what? A typical entrepreneur, especially the women entrepreneurs, are too busy to keep records. In their world, what is most important is I need to sell, I need to make something, and in fact, most of the time they don't even go and back that. That is food for the day, tomorrow is another day. We don't understand that as the banking world. And I was in conversation with my boss once about this, my former boss, and he said to me, why do you think that is so? And I said, I think I didn't even know it until I moved into that world. The world that I know is a corporate world, or that I used to know is a corporate world. And in corporate, we are used to having a bank account. What is a credit score? We know what a credit score is. We know how to get into a loan. We have bank accounts. So there is a credit track record. And I can't even emphasize this more. We need solutions that women entrepreneurs can use without the traditional way of banking. That, for me, is the key to unlocking this issue. One of the things I've realized as well is that some banks have actually done a lot to meet these women entrepreneurs halfway. For example, Capitec in South Africa has decided to open branches in taxi stops or taxi areas where these entrepreneurs feel like they're home. And that's where they give their services. A lower LSM woman entrepreneur does not feel comfortable discussing finance. They are not comfortable because they think that there is too much risk, but also people will laugh at me because I don't know what I'm talking about. Just the other day, I had an experience where I was talking to a businessman about something that we want to do together. He doesn't know my background, so he said to me, will access to finance be a problem for you? I laughed. I said, you can't say that to a former banker, right? But that is also just the perception of people out there who think that women have got a problem to access finance. So maybe it is not just that perception, it's a fact.
Well, and that, yeah, Maureen, I wanted to bring you in because we were talking to you about some of the solutions that Standard Bank is supporting, is helping with this.
So one of the partnerships that we have with the United States government around lending to SMEs is with the U.S. African Development Foundation. And that program takes grant capital that Standard Bank has made available and blends it with grant capital that the US ADF is making available. And we're using it to work with SMEs, not exclusively women-owned SMEs, but there are women-owned SMEs in the cohort. So I'd say about a third of the businesses that we're working with are women-owned. And the idea is, and it goes to your point, Lorato, about thinking differently about how to get some of these very small businesses into the banking community. So we start with grant capital, and this grant capital can be used for to purchase capital equipment. So if you need supplies, equipment, to build a structure, or could be also used for training, capacity building, helping with books, whatever the case may be. And we work with these entrepreneurs and try to get them to a place where success for us would be, and for the African Development Foundation, that they can become a commercial customer for the bank. So the idea is they come in the door through this partnership, and we learn, we get to know the companies together, we get to know the entrepreneurs. And I'm proud to say that of the companies that we've started with in this pilot program, a third of them have graduated to becoming, customers of the bank, where they can qualify for a loan and grow as any other customer would. And so we're looking to scale up that partnership to other countries. So we started in Kenya. We're looking at several other countries in East Africa. And we think it's an interesting model where, going to your point about how do you bring in more really small companies into the banking sector in a way that's maybe a little bit less threatening to start, and that helps make these companies set up for success.
And that's significant too, because this is a region where female entrepreneurs are dominant, right, across countries. And so, Salvador, I wanted to bring you in just from the U.S. perspective. I mean, Maureen was just mentioning some innovative solutions that Standard Bank has come up with. What more do you think from the U.S. private sector can be done to support smaller female entrepreneurs in the region? No.
Hello? Okay, sorry. Thank you for the question, and following Maureen, this has to be, it's not by design. We need to be very clear on what we want to achieve, very intentional. investment, borrowing decisions need to be intentional and have a gender lens. Otherwise, it won't happen overnight. What we are trying to do is internally, but also with our stakeholders, and it's great that Maureen was mentioning one of the partnerships that we have. It's precisely scaling this type of partnerships around the world. We have 15,000 primarily financial institutions, but also non-FIs, fintechs, right? That we are all more intentional in developing an ecosystem to all these points, that it's really intentional in making decisions with gender lenses. We have it in the corporate world, and I think it's great, right? We need to, from everything, hiring, ensuring we have a diverse pool of candidates, that our senior leadership is diverse, the board of directors, our teams have to be diverse. But how we translate those corporate policies, guidance, into tangible outcomes and actions in the ecosystem is, from a corporate world, I think it's the most challenging part, and we need to do that. We won't transform this by ourselves. It's a joint effort. But to be more specific on your questions, and let me illustrate it with that framework that I was mentioning before, access to finance, markets, and skills are all embedded in what we're trying to do. So through the foundation, and I am not part of the foundation, but I know the work of our colleagues from the foundation. We are doing a better job in terms of impact investments. And there was a reference from Ino to 2X, right? And we are part of that network. This is a perfect example of the ecosystem, if I can use that word, that we need to change the lenses of all our business decisions. So in the case of our foundation, we are targeting, and Maureen mentioned one of several examples, but I want to bring the example in Nigeria of a VC that you might know, the Arwa, where they are making an investment in only female-owned businesses in certain regions of Nigeria where there's an important need to make a difference in their lives of all these business women. And we are very intentional, just to put an example from the foundation, where we want to invest. We're not going to do it directly. We don't have that area of expertise, but we have a foundation, and that's what we're investing in. If we move to fintech, which is an area where we are developing all the time, we depend on fintech to bring new solutions and innovation. Only 1 out of 10 fintechs, unfortunately, is women-owned, right? We have a fintech challenge every year. We want to build a more inclusive fintech environment, and probably they are the best position to really make this transformation in terms of how you see borrowing decisions, developing certain apps, certain different ways of doing business to support this transformation. And the third one, I think Maureen was mentioning the value of the network. And I think I don't have to say that to females that are in the corporate world, executives, it's a given, right? But let's think about all the rest that doesn't have access to that network. I was talking here with a Botswanan small business, and I'm glad, and I hope there are many like her who are coming here to build that network, and she needs investors for a mining company, and I hope she will connect with a lot of them. This is a perfect example where we need to really leverage, maximize the power of those networks. We have an initiative, we call it She's Next, that it's exactly what we want to do, to really project whether it's a fintech, a small business, marketing skills in the digital era, we cannot really succeed if we don't have the right set of skills. Through Instagram, open new markets. So I extended probably too much in my response, but I just want to give you a flavor of the different areas where we are trying to support with these lenses.
No, that's helpful. Did you want to jump in, Loretta? Or?
Yes, I would like to jump in and talk about a little bit more about the digital financial solutions, because I think that could give us an innovative way of actually getting these women to come on board and giving them a safe space. I think if you look at the M-Pesas, the e-wallets, there are solutions that people are comfortable with, especially the women entrepreneurs. I'm always fascinated when I go and do my hair, and my hairdresser wants me not to pay her with cash, but rather to take it into a wallet. Now, because these are now seen by women entrepreneurs as safe spaces, they can actually get their children also to help them to use them. So the next step then is, how then do we find apps where women can actually apply for loans so that access to financing is bridged? And how do banks then do that credit scoring? Given that, do they do it on an app, Maureen? Do they trust a certain scoring system? Those are the innovative solutions that I think we should be moving to, because I believe if we can find a way to use these solutions, that gap will definitely be bridged. Otherwise, we're going to be here again in 5 years talking exactly the same thing.
So you're essentially saying to rewrite the system.
Exactly.
And we're talking a lot about private sector solutions, of course, because we are the private sector, but I know it's important to bring in the public sector, right? Because we need the public sector to enable a lot of this innovation. So I'm curious from all of you, where we're seeing models working on the continent. I mean, are there the right policies in place to support a lot of this innovation, or what would you like to see? Boitumelo, I'm looking at you.
Thank you. I think I would like to see the implementation of all the policies, initiatives, and programs that are aimed at bringing that change in.
Like what? Can you be...
Okay. I would want to give an example, like where there is an initiative which is aimed at promoting women in business. It's good to have such policies, but the most important thing is to implement the said policy. Because as long as it's on paper and it's not implemented, it's not going to help anyone. And from me, coming from a change management perspective as a change practitioner, there's very little that is being done in terms of implementation and making sure that there is a creation of awareness to know of programs and initiatives that are being implemented rather than have been developed. I can only know when you have informed me. And the other thing would be to capacitate me where I am lacking, so that I get to identify the gaps that I have and to see what is it that I would need to do to close those gaps. Because as long as we bring in that empowerment to women, and they will go out and empower other women. As the quote says, an empowered woman empowers women. We do that better as women. You take whatever teaching initiative that you would have received and share it with your fellow sisters, your cousins, and your friends. So the most important thing is to ensure that policies, initiatives, and programs are implemented, and not only implemented, socialized, and there is enough monitoring to ensure that we get the benefits of that, and to ensure that it's benefiting the very private sector, the woman in the street, who is supposed to be the recipient. That is it for me.
That's great. Maureen, yeah.
So just to comment a little bit, so part of my role sitting in New York is to do some of the work and to be our liaison with the US government agencies, with the World Bank, the UN, et cetera. And I know we've talked a lot about this 2X challenge, but I just want to talk a little bit more about it for one reason, and that is, for those of you that don't know how it came about, it was a G7 initiative that started in 2018, where it was a joint communique among a number of DFIs, including those from the United States, from Europe, and there were also a number of private sector companies involved. And a commitment was made to provide $15 billion US dollars over time, and I'm not sure what the time frame is. Maybe Eno can help me, but the idea is that all of these DFIs are using the same criteria to lend towards gender lens investing. And from an African bank's point of view, that's very powerful. So if I'm speaking to the US government, which we do, about raising funding for the bank to on-loan to SMEs, or if I'm talking to the Canadian government about such an initiative, all of a sudden I noticed everyone has the same criteria. And that never happens. And I was like, what is this 2X challenge? So we started doing our homework and we thought, well, you know what, this is so great because now, as long as the bank starts measuring the same things that these DFIs are measuring and have made commitments to, we can raise money for women, for gender lens investing from across the world. And so, you know, the things that they're measuring, which I think is actually the interesting thing about this conversation and would be, you know, very positive for all of us sitting here, is that they're looking at the percentage of women ownership or founders in the companies that we would be lending to has to be at least 51%. 30% of the board or staff of the organization that we would be lending to have to be women. The percentage of women in the workforce of the company is measured. The product that's being produced by the company, whether it's used predominantly to benefit women, can be measured and qualify you for this 2X challenge, or that 30% of the loan proceeds that the bank would be making meet those criteria that I just mentioned. So all of a sudden, all of the DFIs from around the world are looking at the same things. So all of a sudden, Standard Bank is looking at all of these things too and finding ways to mobilize that kind of money to track the kind of success, you know, we would be having along these lines. I think it's very powerful.
Salvador, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I just wanted to say that one of the key issues that we deal with as women entrepreneurs is, you mentioned accessibility earlier, is accessibility to this information. Right now, my eyes are going, I'm seeing stars because you are mentioning 15 billion, that is somewhere US dollars. How do I access that? And people in the room who are sitting in corporates may know how to access it because it could be part and parcel of what they do on a day-to-day basis, or they could be interacting with people like ourselves to get this information. How does this woman, entrepreneur, who is selling fat cakes, able to access it? I think that's key to understanding how then do we bridge this gap.
Well, who is responsible for that, would you say? I mean, because you're saying the message needs to be getting out to, you know, everyone. Who should the onus be on? Because Maureen is one person, the bank is, you know, one institution. Should it be on the government? Should it be on, I mean, what do you think? Oh, yep.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a collaborative effort. Government is the policy custodian, private sector, trade agencies, advocacy bodies, associations which speak on behalf of SMMEs and the informal sector. Because we need all of those in the room to ensure that there is common understanding and common application. So it's not a single responsibility to just one stakeholder. It takes all that concerted effort for all of those stakeholders to join hands and ensure that that takes place for me. Thank you.
Salvador, jump in.
Yeah, just to add, and again, the intentionality, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but everyone has to do its part in this effort. And to your question, I think the government definitely has a great role to play. This lack of information, of access, it's the private sector, but we need to scale also the efforts from policies, specialized agencies, that there's really that connectivity between the private and the public sector. Unfortunately, it's easier said than done. But we need to ensure that that happens, because otherwise we continue in very different spaces and we're not reaching to the last mile, which is what you're saying. How can we ensure there's enough demand? What I'm hearing from some VCs is there's not even demand sometimes, right? Because probably we're not targeting the right businesses, the right countries or whatever. So matching that supply and demand won't happen with good intentions. Has to be done. But to your question, on the policy side, it's very important that we have more KPIs from the government, just like the Bloomberg has a gender index, right, in the US for companies.
Yes, that's true.
We need more peer pressure. At a company level, we have it. All the corporates are now, right, luckily, doing our best to create more inclusive corporations, gender-balanced corporations. The same has to happen in the rest of the society. I don't think many governments are even tracking the financial inclusion statistics from a gender perspective. I know the World Bank, CGAP is doing a lot of work of that, but sometimes the surveys that the governments are doing are not revealing the gender imbalance. The Findex survey, I think, just started with the last one, or the previous one, with the gender component. So again, it's the lenses that investment, borrowing, policy decisions have to have that component.
And when we think about this opportunity at this point in time for the U.S. and Africa to really strengthen the partnership that already exists, I'm curious where you all think if we can identify the sectors that present maybe the biggest opportunity for this moment, considering a lot of the innovation and a lot of the entrepreneurs that are across the continent. I mean, are there certain sectors that you all are paying the most attention to for women-owned businesses across the continent?
Sorry about that. I'd like to believe we could first start to leverage on existing opportunities. If you take AGOA, which offers quite a number of opportunities across a number of sectors. And the question would be, what's our preparedness level as a country, as private sector, to be able to be active participant in that particular initiative? And again, looking at the recently introduced AFCFTA, which has a specific protocol on women and youth in trade. And they are looking at initiatives that can assist and propel women to do better in the marketplace within the African continent. And it doesn't limit in terms of what sector you can participate in. Then the question is, as women, are we then willing to be active and participate in those sectors which in the previous years were known to be a male-dominated sector? So it calls for us to have a mindset change, to say, I know I have it within me, I can do it. Thank you.
Lorato, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I believe that women entrepreneurs, like men entrepreneurs, are skilled in many different sectors, so they can play across board. But in my experience, and my experience really talks to banking and manufacturing, FMCG, I have found women extremely good at things that have to do with them using their hands and multitasking. Women are multitaskers of note. And I was just amazed in my factory. 2 years ago, I introduced a new product. And the food scientists came in to tell them exactly how to make the product. I was quite apprehensive and anxious about this new product, whether they're going to be able to do it, because the food scientists are just going to be there for 24 hours. The following day, my girls had produced that product perfectly and never needed the food scientists to come back. And this showed me that once they get the grasp of a process, they're then very good at just continuing to grow it and expand it. And I found that the men, on the other hand, struggled. So for me, manufacturing, at least food manufacturing, I could say that the women are very good at food manufacturing. And it's an area where if we really spend resources in Botswana to grow and expand, because we've got lots of women who can go into that sector, it's a sector that we can do very well in.
Maureen, are there specific sectors that Standard Bank, that Standard Bank is watching very closely, or most of the investment is going to?
So when it comes to SMEs, we're indifferent to the sector, just like you say. entrepreneurs are involved in so many different things that we couldn't possibly sectorize our SME lending. But in our corporate and investment bank, we're very focused on a couple of areas right now. The first is the just transition and the provision of power across the continent being a massive both challenge but also opportunity for us. And at Standard Bank, we're bulls on the continent, so we're confident there's solutions here, and we want to be part of that solution. So energy and infrastructure and the just transition. We're seeing, and I guess maybe I'll speak to a little bit what we're seeing in the US-Africa corridor as well. So if I think about our customers out of the New York office, I'd say the next area where there's a huge focus is around consumer, so consumer products and packaging. We've seen an enormous growth in that sector in the US-Africa corridor. I would also say high tech and TMT, fintech, the work that Visa does, we're seeing quite a bit in that space as an opportunity. And we, of course, there's just a ton of activity between the US banks and the African banks, and then the US institutional investors that are taking a greater interest. And then lastly, I would say probably the mining and metal sector has always been a very large one for Standard Bank, but I think now when you think about the just transition, the need for critical minerals, there's a massive opportunity there for us as well.
And Salvador?
Informality is a big challenge. So for us, SMBs is obviously a priority. We believe that in Africa there are at least 40 million small and medium-sized businesses that are not accepting digital payments. And at least half of those are probably women-owned. We're also agnostic, right? It's even very, very hard to have very specific targeted business strategies to have that gender component. But at the end, we want to, and that's a commitment, to really help build digital capabilities for SMBs. Just on the formal sector, it's still a challenge. If we bring the informality, it's at least half, another similar amount. I remember seeing statistics of close to 100 million SMBs for Africa alone. So that's a big focus that we have, not only as Visa, but with all the players that can really reach to the right businesses and ensure the digital skills, right? The understanding of what is behind a digital payment. It's not only accepting a card, it's really the access to the information, to marketing channels. I was mentioning Instagram, how important is social media, not only to promote your company, but actually as a channel for selling products. So that comprehensive set of value services are key to bring to all these female-owned businesses. That's where the focus is.
Do you think digital has the potential to propel Africa, the continent, the various countries, in terms of female leadership and female-owned businesses, propel it ahead of other countries around the world? I mean, is this an opportunity, perhaps?
Thank you for bringing that, because you're just reminding me of what you heard in Marrakesh. I mean, it's not only us. Africa is leapfrogging in fintech. That happened with the mobile device. And we continue seeing a lot of very interesting activity in the fintech space. Some of those solutions targeting what I was mentioning before. And we announced recently a new accelerator program for Africa that's in the process of being deployed. And our hope is that bringing this additional support, that first of all, we will have strong female representation in an accelerator, but secondly, that we are really developing what we were discussing before, the right solutions, the right technology to address business decisions that probably with typical lenses, we're not addressing the root causes of those gaps. So it will take us some time, but I think it's a collective effort, and through our partners, people like you or colleagues, hopefully we can have an impact.
I'm glad you brought up the concept of time, because I wanted to know when we'll start to see the trajectory turning a little bit. As Enno mentioned earlier, we're going the wrong direction. But when do you anticipate we'll start to see things shifting a bit? I mean, are there any indications that we're already turning the tide?
From what perspective?
From the perspective of, supporting the informal sector, female business leaders, and giving them the tools that they need to really, succeed.
Yeah, I just feel like it's been such a focus of ours for a long time. One of the issues we've been working on, and it's sometimes a frustration for our customers in the United States when they say to me, Maureen, so tell me about what your mobile payments platform is like across the continent. And so I have to pull out a 20-page document that explains in Uganda it's this, in Kenya it's that, in South Africa it's this, because you're talking about different regulatory environments. And a lot of these solutions have kind of bubbled up, from the bottom. And in some cases, we're working with mobile network operators. Sometimes we're working the telecoms. Other times, we have a solution that the bank owns. And so when you're a U.S. entity that's trying to find a comprehensive solution across the continent, sometimes it can be frustrating. Sometimes the card companies have more comprehensive solutions that are similar. But so one of the things that we as Standard Bank are doing at the moment is rolling out a mobile payments and wallet program that will be consistent across the 20 countries where we operate. It's called Unayo. It looks very similar to what you would see in a lot of places, but I think what's powerful about it, especially to an audience of folks that includes people from the US that are trying to operate in Africa, is that it will be the same ultimately. But when you ask the question about time, it takes some time to make that happen and to take what is a very different regulatory environment in one market and to produce a product that feels the same in another. But it's something that we're committed to doing. And we think it'll make it easier for companies when it comes to payments, when it comes to savings, when it comes to entrepreneurship.
And on that note, Boy Mello, you mentioned AFCFTA, but that could be an opportunity then, considering what Maureen said, to shape a cohesive strategy, right, across the continent to support small businesses.
Hello. Yeah, that opportunity is there. Over and above the protocol on women and youth in trade, there's another protocol on digital trade, which I would like to believe is also geared towards bringing women into that space for them to feel comfortable that it's okay to do business and transact within that platform. Because what comes to my mind as she was talking and as Lorato was saying earlier on was that it offers some form of security even when you are working beyond the normal hours. When somebody is paying you either through e-wallet, pay to sell, whatever a platform that you use, as compared to when somebody gives you that cash. And it's easier for you as a woman. We will be looking at other aspects besides being a business person, that you know that there aren't enough tomatoes and onions at home. So you might pass by the grocery shop and do your groceries using the business money. So that's some of the education that we would need, and also to take it to the woman on the street to inform them that and create that awareness that it's possible, it's doable, and that's the safest mode of doing business. And it even helps you to transact with customers that are beyond the borders of Botswana, where your products manage to get into the international market.
Yeah, and that's important because we're talking about expanding outside of the borders, potentially even to the US. So that could be critical, right? Visa could potentially play a role in that.
Any free trade agreement, and the AFCFTA is no exception, needs to ensure there are no barriers for trade. Digital trade is a key component in Africa. That's where we want to support. There's a discussion of a pan-regional payment system. We want to be part of the solution on how to ensure this can happen. There are logistical challenges, physical challenges that we need to be aware of. But in the digital space, the technology is there, the players are there. It's just how to ensure that the right solutions, the channels are open. And I think very hard to respond to your question on how fast we will make an impact. But I think we need to be optimistic with what this continent is doing. It's moving very fast. And I think there's intention to change things. It's not enough. But if we get the right combination of policies and what the CCA and the US government are doing is great, right? That American companies are really leading by example, are supporting this objective of diminishing the gender barriers, improving the business ties. And I think there's room for optimism. Every country will move at a different pace. You have to have the right mix. And some countries are moving very fast. I was looking at the mobile money statistics. There are countries, Uganda, I was looking, there are more women with mobile money accounts than men. I think there's still the challenge of the banks. To your point, we need to ensure there's full interoperability, that it really shouldn't make a big difference if it's a mobile money account or a bank account. And that's what we're trying to play, to really integrate the infrastructure that will make trade possible.
And I just wanted to add one point on this idea of how we have made some progress, because I think we should end this panel on a positive note. And I wanted to share, Standard Bank, we are a long-term partner to Africa.com. They have a definitive list of women CEOs in Africa. And in 2022, they did a big survey of looking at, now these are large companies, but I think this is a wonderful aspiration for the small SMEs. So they look at companies that are listed on one of Africa's stock exchanges and having a revenue of over $100 million and a market cap of over $150 million. And they looked at the profitability of these companies, men versus women. So apologies to the men in the audience, but what stood out from the 2022 results is that the listed African companies with women CEOs outperformed those with male CEOs. So I think that's a wonderful way for us to think about why supporting women entrepreneurs and SMEs is so important, because as they grow, it's just more success in the economy. And the other positive note I wanted to share, because again, I think it's so important for us to just be aware of the progress that's been made, is that there was another study that McKinsey did looking at board representation on the continent. And this might surprise you, but that Africa has the highest female representation on company boards in any region of the world. And that's 25% against the global average of 17. So it's not a huge difference, but it is a difference. And I think that's something that, you know, African boards ought to be proud of, so.
Totally agree, yeah. And I think that's also something very optimistic. I was just thinking about the next generation, because of course Africa has the youngest population in the world. And so for those young, maybe future entrepreneurs, hearing those stats I think is a good way to end. We're out of time, but I think, you know, you guys left us with a lot to think about, and I hope we can come back in a year and just talk more about the progress and tout that. But thank you so much, and thank you to everyone here, Maureen, Boitumelo, Lorato, and Salvador. Thank you guys so much for your time, and thanks everyone.
Brings us to the end of the session on women and leadership, especially within the African context in terms of trade and investment. And the key pointers there, I think the biggest pick out from there was the ability to actually apply mobile money systems that will eventually be able to assist women with payment. And examples pointed out there again was that women seem to be very good at multitasking, something which, as pointed out, you train them once and then you're able to actually believe that they'll keep the process going and keep it running. But the mobile money plans are that the US might be interested in trying to find a way to find synergy, because it's the easiest way. If you think of women populations that are in trade, many of them are found in rural and developing areas where there might not be any ATMs or banking infrastructure. However, we can go into mobile banking, we should be able to get more. But to continue now, we're getting to another conversation of the day with the Minister of Trade from Malawi, Rebanda, and the conversation we are going to be facing with just understanding first, right? So good afternoon and welcome to Botswana and ultimately Botswana Television.
Afternoon, it's my pleasure.
All right. So your first time in Botswana?
For sure, yes.
Okay, and how's the weather?
Good. I think weather in Africa is almost the same, more especially southern and central Africa.
Okay. Right.
So it's cold here, it's cold in South Africa, it's cold in Malawi.
All right.
Sure.
At least nothing has changed there.
Sure.
Minister, the key thing to understand, obviously, I would want to pick up a bit of a background of Malawi in terms of the investment and trade area of it, to know the key products. Obviously, we do know of the rice, we do know of the Malawian gin, we do know of tea and other products, but it would be ideal to also get that overview from you, sir.
So Malawi is one of the countries in Southern Africa, which is agro-based. So 80% plus of our people depend entirely on agriculture. So it's a feed basket for Africa, where you can get maize, which is corn, tobacco, which is our cash crop, forex ena, and then we have tea, coffee, macadamia, sugar, and more recently we've also gone into legumes value chain, where we are producing in large quantities soya beans, groundnuts, and beans. So these are some of the products you can easily get in Malawi. So but we are also very much famous with Malawi gin.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so wherever you go, people would always ask you about Malawi gin. That's, I think, one of the products that we are proud to have come from Malawi.
And that obviously translates to it being a value chain product. And looking at how it is now, we do know of Lake Malawi, and I curiously want to know, is there any kind of fishery coming out of Lake Malawi that is worth taking out of the market?
Of course, Malawi is very well known with the Lake Malawi having fresh waters, and it has also over 100 species of fish. But famous to it is jumbo fish. This is the fish which is very delicious, like no other. It is a product that we can ably and proudly export. So yes, we have fish and fish products that can come from Lake Malawi, that can also become one of our forex earners.
Right. Now, looking at, obviously, within Southern African region, what are your key products that you are moving across the different countries within SADC?
Well, firstly, I need to make it clear that Malawi is also utilizing the trade regimes within the continent. So COMESA, SADC, EAC, and more recently, the Free Continental Trade Area. So basically, it depends from which part of Africa you are coming from. So we are able to export legumes to Eastern Africa or East Africa markets, like Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda. We are also able to sell to neighboring countries like Zambia, where we always exchange in terms of commodities. We buy from Zambia, they buy from us, mostly agricultural products. More recently, we've also started exporting poultry and poultry products to Mozambique. Not forgetting sugar, we also export sugar. Malawi produces sugar. We have two major, sugar industries in Malawi, so we are able to send sugar and export sugar, across Africa.
That's interesting. Now, you've come for the US-Africa Summit. Obviously, it also includes trading within Africa, but primarily trading outside Africa. The key interest now, which is the hottest topic, becomes AGOA agreements, especially between Malawi and the US. That how are you benefiting, or how have you benefited or capitalized on AGOA as Malawi?
AGOA is a facility that has helped Malawi quite a lot. We might not benefited as we wanted, but mind you, we are able to export to US tea, coffee, and tobacco, utilizing the AGOA platform. And we are looking forward to increasing our exports so that we actually utilize AGOA facility. I think one of the issues that we need also to indicate here is that there is a very strong ties in terms of bilateral relations and trade relations between US and Malawi and US and Africa. I think that's the reason why, as trade minister, we saw it fit that we need to come and participate in this US-Africa Business Summit because we thought that we could do further strengthen our relationship, trade relationship with the US in terms of not only the market, but also access to financing as well as capacity building of our SMEs. So we value add, we agro-process so that we increase the foreign earnings through expansion of our export base.
And going very well, obviously, with enhancing Africa's value in the global value chain. There are products that people package and send out that create, as you said, SME business, which eventually ultimately supports employment within the country. And at the moment, the value chain expansion that you're talking about, which products are you looking at capitalizing on, especially to take them into African continental free trade area?
I think Africa predominantly is where you can get agricultural products, just like in Botswana, where you are capitalizing on cattle and cow, meat and beef products. So you value add and then you export. In the case of Malawi, mostly agricultural products. We are looking at how best we can value add to, for example, soya beans, ground nuts, tobacco, tea and macadamia. But possibly one of the areas that I need to stress here is that time has come for African continent not to send low products, but to value add. I think that resonates well with the theme of this US-Africa Business Summit, because we want now to look at Africa selling finished products, because these are the products that can fetch more. So we have quite a lot in terms of products that we are putting on the market, or we are selling across Africa and beyond Africa. But we are now trying also to move as a country towards industrialization, so we can be able to value add agro-process. Because in so doing, we'll be creating more jobs for young people. We'll be increasing the foreign earnings from Forex. Then we'll also be expanding the export base, because instead of just sending low, we'll actually be sending finished products whose origin will be the African countries. And that is a plus, and I think a take-home message from the summit here.
So now, looking at all this that needs to be done, it eventually means if you're going industrialization, you need to have people come in and invest within the Malawian market and set up the factories, set up the processing plants, and obviously skill transfer. The key thing that comes into play is the ease of doing business. Let's say someone in Botswana who has always wanted to run a coffee brand and feels, okay, instead of doing it in Botswana, let me move into Malawi, set up a factory there, make whatever coffee I want to make and send it out to Botswana or other markets. How easy is it to enter and trade within Malawi?
Very easy. Very easy in the sense that Malawi as a country has now created a conducive environment for investment in the country by making it easier for you to access in terms of documentation that can facilitate for registration of your investment, but also provision of some incentives that would motivate you to uniquely come and invest in the country. I'm just 5 months old in office, but when I came, I did not just come empty-handed. I knew I'm coming to a ministry that is very critical in terms of economic transformation in the country, because the trade generates revenue. We grow, that is production, by or with Ministry of Agriculture, but we trade what has been produced. Now it is only when we trade more that our economy can transform, and then when we actually open up for FDIs, the foreign direct investments. So what I did was to develop the 4 key performance indicators, which formed part of my roadmap to make sure that we simplify the ease of doing trade. So one is collaboration and networking. I think that's what we are doing here, trying to meet a number of people to network and collaborate, so we see how best within Africa we can be able to do business. Secondly, I looked at the SME development as a second KPI. So we are now looking at how the local Africans and Malawians can participate in doing business by becoming small, medium enterprises. And the third one has been a local industrialization, where we are now trying to court investors to invest by setting up industries and factories in Malawi, which is very key. And then the last one is the legal and regulatory framework, where we are coming up with investment-friendly legislations. So having gone through the 4 KPIs, and then also looking at the core functions of the ministry, now we are realizing that almost everybody is coming to Malawi because they say, okay, there is conducive environment because the legislation is user-friendly to and for investment. And then secondly, we have created what we call a single window, where we are providing services under one roof. So there is an institution called Malawi Investment Trade Center, which is an MDA under my ministry. This is the one that facilitates for investment into the country. And what we've done is, instead of going to various offices, which is time consuming, you get everything under one roof. You come to my ministry through MITC, within 2 days you are done and you hit the ground running. This, I think, is a way to go if Africa is to develop, because we are in a competitive world. If we are having, bureaucracies where it takes time for investments and investors to come and invest, then they opt to go to another country where the ease of doing business
is really there.
Is really there.
All right. Now, another thing that comes into play is obviously infrastructure. IT being primary, road networks being secondary to that as well, because these days internet comes before roads, because I don't have to move anywhere until you've sold it. How is Malawi doing in the terms of especially connectivity and infrastructure development around ICT?
We are developing and advancing technological wise. Just last week, Minister of Information in Malawi and Minister of Information in Tanzania have actually signed an interconnection MOU where connectivity becomes easier in terms of internet, for instance. But we are also, through Ministry of Trade, embarked on the road network, where we are developing roads to connect centers to centers of production, so that agricultural productivity and products could move easily from point A to point B. Not only that, we are also now trying to look at, we are in a global village. How do we get connected to Botswana, for example? how do we get connected to US? So we are also advancing in terms of building networks at that level. But maybe one very important thing that I need to indicate, as I said earlier on, is that almost every country, including Malawi, are now moving towards industrialization. So industrialization is the use of technology to make sure that we add value to the services that we are doing, so that by a click of a button, you get exactly what you want. Time is long gone when people who would like to communicate with Africa would probably write a letter and it takes months to reach to the destination, or would simply think of flying or using a ship and it takes months for you to reach the destination. This time around, you use so many, media of communication, either WhatsApp, email, Facebook, and what have you. So Malawi is not lagging behind. We are also trying to become an active player in the global village.
All right. So now the key thing that comes that between Botswana and Malawi, what can you learn from Botswana and what can Botswana learn from Malawi?
It's very interesting. Just yesterday, I had a very extensive talk with Senza, the Special Economic Zone Authority, where I met the senior management. Because Malawi would like to develop the special economic zones, we are calling them industrial parks. Now Malawi being agro-based, and that Botswana is also dependent on agriculture and some other natural resources, we thought that we could learn a leaf from CESA on how they are developing their special economic zones in terms of structure and the legal framework, how they are going to manage it. So we have actually had very good discussions, and we are now trying to establish the formal relationship between my minister and Minister of Trade, the special economic zones in Malawi and special economic zones in Botswana. You keep cattle here. Yeah. We also keep cattle there. How do we use the meat and the meat products and process them within the special economic zones and become a product that we can send to either America or European markets? So we need to collaborate and we need to establish that kind of relationship. So I'm happy that this is not my last time to come to Botswana. I will keep on coming. I should also take this opportunity, I think, to thank the leadership of Botswana. Yesterday I attended the dinner. I was very much inspired by the speech of the President, Dr. Masisi, where he said Botswana's are diamonds and the diamonds are Botswana's. What that meant to me is that the Botswana are the ultimate owners of diamond, and that diamond belong to Botswana. And that is a product that has transformed the economy of this country. It has come, and time is now, that Africans should be able to be proud of their own resources. So we have got minerals in Africa, but how much are we benefiting from such minerals? Maybe Botswana could be a role model and a very good example for countries like my country to learn from. We've just explored quite a number of minerals, and we have established Ministry of Mining, and we've also established mining company, and we've passed mining law, but now we need to operationalize it. How do we do it? We need to come here and learn. So I also had a very extensive talk with the Mining Development Corporation of Botswana, who have actually shared with us the ease of doing business in terms of how we can manage, mineral resources.
Which also brings a lot of exciting hope that to see economies diversifying. In terms of diversifying, obviously the agro market in Malawi is big and it's wide and it's got products that can go far. But diversifying beyond that and growing new businesses, especially for young entrepreneurs, because in Botswana now entrepreneurship has become the biggest thing that is driving the economy. How are you developing those ones, and how can they work with the Botswana ones to try and develop the region?
I think number one is human capital development. We need to develop our young people and the young generation to have knowledge and skills that are compatible within the continent, but also beyond the continent. You know, you can export labor, but what kind of labor? So, for example, if you have good miners, geologists here that have got skills on rare earth, why not sending them to Malawi? Because we can learn. So you will be providing expertise, but at the same time you also be earning a living. Similarly, we have got very knowledgeable agricultural experts in Malawi. Why not sending them to Botswana so that they can also develop the agricultural industry here? So what I'm trying to say is that time has come where we need to have knowledge transfer and build our skills within the continent that can help develop our economy. That's number one. Number two, we need to diversify in terms of our economic activities. So we cannot predominantly depend on agriculture alone. We need also to explore other means of bringing economy and developing our economy, one of which is carbon financing and climate change management, where we, as countries, we can benefit from carbon financing. Issues of REDD+, where you generate credits from trees, issues of use of green energy, where you generate credits from solar pH, issues of use of energy efficient cooking stoves, where you can also generate credits. So African countries, Botswana, Malawi, and any other country, need to step up, strategically position themselves to benefit from carbon financing and carbon market. Not only that, now we also need to look at what God gave us. So God gave us natural resources. We have diamond here. We have rutile in Malawi. We have niobium. We have ruby. We have uranium. We have gemstone. These are minerals that can also help develop and transform Malawi's economy. But probably what we need to do is develop our infrastructure, have technology, process the minerals at country level so that we sell or processed minerals, because that's when we can fetch more money.
Okay. Now, towards closing, I'd like to know, do you believe that Africa has the capacity to actually feed the whole world?
If people are eating globally, go in their shops, what they are eating comes from Africa. That is a sign enough that Africa has the capacity to feed the world. And Africa should also take an opportunity of the food supply chain that has been broken in Europe because of the Ukraine-Russia war, where we can utilize that gap by producing more and sending it to European market where we can fetch more monies. So yes, the answer is yes, Africa has the capacity to feed the world. It simply needs, one, to develop the technology and the infrastructure, two, to have access to financing so that the financing becomes a means for production, and then we produce more, add value, then fill the gap.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. And as the President said yesterday, because you love the diamond, on your way out, buy one.
Definitely. And not only buying one, I think I need also to make a plan.
To make a plan.
To keep on coming here so that I become part of here. Basically, maybe I should conclude by saying, as Minister of Trade and Industry, but also as a Pan-African, Africancy, I believe in one Africa, one people and one continent. So I hope if we have that kind of spirit, and the spirit that I've seen in the leadership yesterday, where Botswana are diamonds and diamonds are Botswana, so we are Africa and Africa is us, this continent can develop.
All right, thank you very much, sir. And that is the conversation and how it ends with the Minister of Trade from Malawi, Banda.
Corporate Council on Africa proudly presents the 15th edition of the US-Africa Business Summit, taking place from 11th to the 14th of July. Our proud host is Botswana, one of the fastest growing economies in the world and a role model in sub-Saharan Africa.
The significance of a business forum such as the US-Africa Business Summit is to re-engage, reconnect with old companies and alliances. It's also to meet new companies and investors. It also gives us a platform to explain ourselves afresh. The US and Africa bind even closer.
Building on the positive momentum of the December US-Africa Leaders Summit and Business Forum, the summit will bring together African heads of state, US and African government officials, top CEOs, and senior business executives. The perfect opportunity to grow your network, access expert information, and close pending deals as we showcase the latest developments in infrastructure, ICT, health, energy, mining, creative industries, and agribusiness. As CCA celebrates its 30-year anniversary, this will be a momentous occasion to present Africa as a strong trade partner for US companies. Join us in Gaborone from 11 to 14 July 2023. The 2023 US-Africa Business Summit is proudly brought to you by Corporate Council on Africa, celebrating 30 years of excellence in building US-Africa business.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. This is In Context. We've been here since the hour of 2 o'clock. I'm going to be with you until the hour of 6 o'clock, and we will be keeping you up to speed with what's happening at Royal Area as the US-Africa Business Summit is ongoing right now. Well, remember earlier on we had a plenary session focusing on women. That was, in recent years, there has been a growing recognition of a pivotal role that women play in driving economic growth and development, particularly as women-owned enterprises and trade players prominent roles in Africa. So the United States and around the globe. So the US-Africa economic relationship presents a tremendous opportunity for women to leverage on their power in terms of women leadership and entrepreneurship. The plenary session aims at employ the challenges and opportunities and best practices in promoting and enhancing women's role in intra-African trade as well as Africa's trade with global partners. We have seen that plenary going on earlier on. We'll be continue crossing over to Royal Area. We'll be keeping you up to speed with what's happening on that side. All right, right now we are going to have another session coming later on, but we still got a lot more coming on the show. Do stay with us.
Botswana. Prepare for an unforgettable journey.
I'm very proud to present Botswana's bid for AFCON 2027.
Ethiopia, Botswana have it.
Our vision for AFCON 2027 is achieving prosperity one goal at a time.
It's something that will change the landscape of Botswana football forever.
After the AFCON, most of our kids will have a chance to play or use those infrastructures.
Beyond football, we will showcase Botswana's natural wonders, cuisines, and rich cultural heritage.
I believe this country, besides football,
besides the event, has a lot more to offer. We'll challenge a lot of countries in Africa with our tourism.
Our hosting plan ensures that AFCON 2027 in Botswana will transcend the game.
Football itself exposes one to the world. This is probably one way where our country will be marketed to the whole world.
Our people are eager to embrace the spirit of AFCON 2027. And our bid is not just for Botswana, but for the entire SADC region. Motu, Imotu, Gabatu.
We love football in Botswana. Give us a chance to host. And I think it will be a great opportunity for the upcoming players to achieve their dreams.
AFCON ra e batla mo Botswana.
This is our chance to host Africa's premier football competition, showcasing our commitment to developing the game on our continent and contributing to the growth of the AFCON tournament.
We've hosted athletics meeting, which was an international athletics meeting, which went very, very, very well. You know, so why not give Botswana an opportunity to shine as well in the sport that they love most?
At every step, Botswana's journey to hosting AFCON 2027 will embody our unwavering commitment to achieving prosperity, one goal at a time.
I support Botswana's bid.
Achieving prosperity.
One goal at a time. That is the theme for Botswana. Go Botswana 2027.
We are ready to welcome Africa and the world to our land, to witness the harmonious union of football excellence and African heritage. Hola, Aene.
All right, welcome back and thank you for staying with us on In Context. Now we'll be crossing over to Royal Area, where the plenary session is talking about Africa's creative industry that has experienced tremendous growth in the past decade. From a marginalized product, we have seen growth in this sector, and it is one of the sectors in the US that is driving the economy of that country. Africa will be learning a lot from that, and other African countries. We're crossing over right now to that plenary session.
That hasn't been solved, right? So given the strategic importance of developing Africa's creative industries and all of the risks that are real and perceived, some of which Thabo outlined in his example about the song, what do you think is the most effective way to address these concerns about risk and enable more financing to flow into the creative industries?
Oh, thank you. It's really great to be here. I echo some of what Thabo was mentioning, in the sense that we need to accelerate a paradigm shift in the development of across emerging markets. Africa is no different. If you think about what's happening with technology, the role of technology, how jobs will shift going forward, where much of the employment will lie going forward will be on the creative sector, where machines are not going to be easily replacing mundane and repetitive tasks. And if you think about what Africa needs, and before I took on this job, I managed telecom infrastructure investments in Africa for many years, so I'm very familiar with the challenges in the continent. It is very hard to find industries that cater to young population. And if you're not aware, creative industries is the single largest employer globally of people on the age bracket between 18 and 35, period. So if you think about the population structure in Africa, which is fundamentally composed of young people, if you think about the needs for hard currency to beefing up stabilize economies across the sector and grow them. If you think about how a creative sector can be empowered by technology, in which Africa is advanced of many other regions in the world, it is obvious that this is the next frontier for us to develop. Now, easier said than done. We have been embarked for the last 12 months very actively in supporting the creative sector, not only in Africa but in emerging markets. We have, in the last year, we've gone from essentially zero to $500 million of investments globally in the creative sector. Extremely good companies on fashion design in Pakistan, visual effects companies out of India catering to all productions that you've heard or seen, like Tenet and Inception and The Last of Us and so on. So, and these are an empowering micro SMEs, individuals, entrepreneurs, etc. So, what we're still not having quite cracked the nut, and I'm welcome, please approach me afterwards if you have good ideas in this regard. We are very good at financing predictable cash flows, right? So it's very easy to lend to a company that generates $500 million of revenues, $300 million of EBITDA, and they say, well, I need 100 more. And we'll do that, for sure. It is very difficult to support micro SMEs and SMEs. And for that, so I'll leave the conversation of equity and debt aside, which you're probably very familiar with. Three things that we're trying to really push the boundaries on things that we're trying to do. One is we are develop what is we call kind of pre-bankability stage engagements, which is essentially putting small pockets of money at risk alongside sponsors that have an idea that we think that if it pans out, it would be an interesting one. So we're discussing with animation companies, piloting certain film funds where we provide the equity gap so that we can facilitate the lending to finance the production slate. And I think that type of initiative helps. We need to work with local banks. We need to provide them backstop facilities, risk-sharing facilities, first loss, which is essentially a way for us to use our very strong balance sheet. We're AAA rated. We have better credit than the US government, and say, bank, you on lend to the creative sector. If things don't pan out, we got you, right? Our first, 10% or 15%, we will absorb so that it doesn't impact your balance sheet because we can support that. That, as much as it's obvious to me and to a lot of people, it's very difficult to implement. But we're working with the relationship banks that we have to support that. And last but not least, I think venture capital, incubators, and private equity scene have a huge role to play for us to invest in them so that they can invest onwards in other subsectors. So I'll stop here. Happy to engage further on this. Thank you. I'm gonna
ask a follow-up question, Herman, which is, of the governments that you have worked with or banks that you have come across and that are trying to solve some of these issues, who do you think, if anyone, is getting it right? And if so, what are some of the things that they're doing that should be encouraged? So we are only in exploratory mode. One bank that has, I think we're very tuned and we actually invested to support the creative sector is Orange Bank out of Côte d'Ivoire. The Industrial Bank in Nigeria, we're having a conversation, Chorus Banks as well. I'm due a conversation with Stanbic. So I think banks are trying to, they see the potential, and I think it's for us to collectively engage in those discussions with a very open mind. In the end, folks, it has to be bankable. Of course, there is a room for donor funding to play, but we cannot build an X billion, trillion dollar industry unless it makes money, right? Because nobody wants to throw our money. So that's where the challenge lies. Great, thank you. Linus, I'm going to turn to you. Nigeria's TV and film sector is one of the largest in the world. Sometimes say it's the third largest, sometimes it's the second largest, behind India and the United States. Can you tell us about the investments that Del York is making in Nigeria's TV film sector. Talk a little bit about why you focused on the Film Academy, why you're now building the studio, and sort of what's going to be involved with that infrastructure. And then tell us how some of the investors that you're talking to for some of your projects are responding.
All right, thank you very much. Just sitting here and listening to the conversations that a number of us are talking about the creative industry, it brings a lot of things to mind. If we're not able to separate the role that creatives play as opposed to the roles that those who understand the business of the creative industry would play, it'll be very difficult to understand why this conversation is so important at this time. In 2010, we had a very clear vision in Nigeria.